Good evening and welcome to the 7 o'clock English news from the Sultanate Oman Television. First, the headlines. His Majesty Sultan Haitham bin Tariq presides over the Council of Ministers meeting at the Husn al-Shmukh Palace and approves an economic stimulus plan to achieve high GDP according to Oman Vision 2040. His Majesty the Sultan confirms that the national strategy for urban development considers as a general framework for directing urban growth as it achieves balance between development dimensions within the coming 20 years. His Majesty the Sultan confirms the importance of accelerating pace of providing COVID-19 vaccine for a large number of citizens and residents. And His Majesty Sultan Haitham bin Tariq issues a royal decree. Those are the headlines, and now the news in detail. His Majesty Sultan Haitham bin Tariq presided over the meeting of the Council of Ministers this morning at Husn al-Shmukh in the Wilayat of Manah. More in the following report.
At the outset of the meeting, His Majesty the Sultan gave thanks and praises to the Almighty Allah for the bounties which He has bestowed on Oman and its people. His Majesty the Sultan prayed to the Almighty Allah to bestow security and peace on the Sultanate and other world countries. His Majesty the Sultan then reviewed the status of the national economy and the adverse effect during the last period due to the decrease of oil prices, which resulted in the increase of financial deficits and public debt, in addition to the impact of the measures that were taken to deal with the spread of the coronavirus last year, as the Sultanate was very quick to take a number of preventative and precautionary measures which overshadowed the economic growth. His Majesty added that in light of the perceptions presented by the government bodies in this regard, a plan for economic stimulus was approved in order to achieve higher growth rates according to Oman Vision 2040. His Majesty stressed that this plan includes a number of incentives and initiatives, namely initiatives related to reducing taxes and fees of the companies, which will begin their activities during 2021 in the economic diversity sectors: industry, tourism, logistics, agriculture and fisheries, wealth and mining. In addition to decreasing income tax rate of small and medium enterprises during 2020 to 2021, as well as reducing rental amount in the special economic zone at Duqm and the industrial estates till 2022. It also included a number of procedures related to that plan, which are incentives for businesses and the investment environment, including facilities to start businesses and granting a long-term residency for foreign investors in accordance with specific controls and conditions that will be announced later after completing the study by the Council of Ministers, in addition to incentives related to the labour market to provide more job opportunities to the citizens. His Majesty expressed his interest in the steps taken by the bodies concerned to deal with the developments in the labour market. On the other side, His Majesty pointed out that the Council of Ministers approved a national strategy for urban development, which confirms that it is considered as the basic pillar to achieve Oman Vision 2040, as it is considered the first long-term strategy and general framework for directing urban growth to achieve balance between social, economy and environmental development dimensions within the coming 20 years, and it came as a result of wide institutional and social participation. The strategy, featured by the needed flexibility to absorb renewable variables and future challenges, included a general framework for urban policies at the national level and at the level of each governorate, in addition to create investment programs and development projects at various sectors. His Majesty also discussed the latest updates of COVID-19 pandemic and the efforts exerted by the government to provide vaccines for various categories of the society, praising these efforts and confirming the importance of accelerating the pace of providing the vaccines for a large number of citizens and residents, in addition to continuing community awareness on this pandemic and applying precautionary measures to prevent them. And on the occasion of the International Women's Day, His Majesty the Sultan greeted the women in Oman and all countries in the world. And at the Sultanate's regional and international relations level, His Majesty reviewed Oman's cooperation with all exerted efforts to achieve security and stability for all countries and people around the world.
His Majesty Sultan Haitham bin Tariq issued a Royal Decree number 24/2021 Article 1 ratifies the agreement between the government of the Sultan of Oman and the government of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka on the mutual visa exemption for holders of the diplomatic, special, official, and service passports. Article 2, this decree shall be published in Official Gazette and comes into force from the date of its issue. His Majesty Sultan Haitham bin Tariq received a cable of thanks from the custodian of the two holy mosques, King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud of Saudi Arabia, in reply to His Majesty's cable on the successful surgery conducted on His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman bin Abdulaziz, Crown Prince, Deputy Prime Minister, and Minister of Defense of Saudi Arabia. The Ministry of Housing and Urban Planning approved 12 usufruct contracts for commercial and industrial lands in the governorates of Muscat and North Al Batina. This comes within the framework of supporting small and medium enterprises, SMEs, with regard to specialized projects that contribute to revitalizing the commercial movement. The approved projects included polyclinic, specialized dental complex, iron recycling plant, and factory of mosaic coated gypsum products. The Civil Aviation Authority decided to allow the return of Boeing 737 MAX aircraft to service from and to the Sultan's airports, and the authority obligated all airlines that wish to operate Boeing 737 MAX aircraft to fulfill all technical requirements for airworthiness and training requirements. It highlighted that the decision came after the success of the tests and checks that the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration conducted and what was approved by the European Aviation Agency and civil aviation authorities. It's worth mentioning that the numbers of travelers through the Sultan's airports until the end of December 2020 reached more than 4,565,000 passengers. The Ministry of Health announced that the total number of COVID-19 cases registered in the Sultan reached 144,831, while the total number of deaths reached 1,597. The total recovered cases reached 135,005, which is 93.2% of the total recovery rate. The ministry indicated that the total number of inpatients reached 210, among which 75 are in the intensive care units. Coinciding with the celebrations of World Obesity Day, Oman Obesity Briefing book titled Obesity in Oman, a Major Public Health Challenge, was inaugurated at the Ministry of Health headquarters. More details in the following report.
Coinciding with the celebrations of the World Obesity Day, Oman Obesity Briefing book titled Obesity in Oman, a Major Public Health Challenge, was inaugurated at the Ministry of Health headquarters. The launch took place through a virtual event held under the auspices of His Excellency Dr. Ahmed bin Mohammed Al-Saidi, Minister of Health. This important document has been developed as a collaboration between the National Diabetes and Endocrine Center, the Department of Non-Communicable Diseases, the Department of Nutrition, the Oman Diabetes Association, and Novo Nordisk, a Danish multinational pharmaceutical company. In his welcoming address, His Excellency Dr. Ahmed bin Mohammed Al-Saidi, Minister of Health, said Oman faces a growing rise in the burden of obesity among its population. More than half of the Omani population are now overweight or obese, with 30% of the population having a BMI of more than 30. These figures showed a rise in the prevalence of obesity in Oman since the last survey in 2008, especially amongst women. Commenting on the importance of generating obesity awareness, His Excellency Mr. Ole Moisby, Ambassador of Denmark to Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman and Yemen, said It's vital to combat the impact of this epidemic disease in the Sultanate of Oman and the MENA region at large. Obesity is a serious chronic disease that affects more than 650 million people around the world. An essential part of this initiative is in line with the commitment to the developing partnerships to develop and implement practical solutions around to address the obesity challenge.
So we launched an Oman obesity briefing book titled Obesity in Oman, a major public health challenge. And the purpose of the book is to shed a light on the growing burden of obesity throughout the world as well as in Oman. Thankfully, there are numerous interventions that are in place, but we're still seeing a growing rise of the burden of obesity, and especially amongst women and children. Right now, we know that as of our 2017 data, that 66% of the population are either overweight or obese. Similarly, in children, the rates of obesity and overweight in children less than 5 years of age is 4%. So there is an ongoing challenge to try and raise awareness amongst the public, amongst all health sectors, be it health or non-health sectors, to this growing epidemic and the need to control it.
Dr. Noor Al-Busaidi, Director of National Diabetes and Endocrine Center, gave an in-depth overview of the Oman Obesity Briefing Book and commented, "This briefing book seeks to inform policymakers, health care professionals, and the general public of the serious and widespread health challenge of obesity in Oman by highlighting its impact on society and individuals." It's worth mentioning that in 2019, Oman hosted the World Obesity Regional Conference on Women and Child First and the Gulf Obesity Surgical Society's 6th Annual Obesity Conference. These events signal that the health community in Oman is committed to addressing the issue of obesity for vulnerable groups and ensuring treatment for people with severe obesity.
This is the Sultan of Oman television. Before we tonight's bulletin, here are the main points once again. His Majesty Sultan Haitham bin Tariq presides over the Council of Ministers meeting at the Hassan Shmoukh Palace and approves an economic stimulus plan to achieve high GDP according to Oman Vision 2040. His Majesty the Sultan confirms that the National Strategy for Urban Development considers as a general framework for directing urban growth as achieves balance between development dimensions within the coming 20 years. His Majesty the Sultan confirms the importance of accelerating pace of providing COVID-19 vaccine for large number of citizens and residents. And His Majesty the Sultan issues a royal decree. And with that, we come to the end of this evening news bulletin. I'd like to remind you to keep following the precautionary measures of wearing face masks, washing hands and keeping physical distance from each other. From all of us here in the newsroom and the studios, good night.